What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the Stamina Templar DPS. Now I do want to give a couple of shoutouts here for a couple of people who have directly and indirectly helped me kind of make this build video. So first of all, I want to give a shout out to Skinny Cheeks, who has been a really big help in kind of sharing his kind of DPS videos in general. I did take a look at his Stamina Templar build, and I do think that his build is stronger than what I've had in the past. I also want to give out a shout out to Liko for pointing out that Deadly Strike is actually stronger than Lokkestiiz when you consider how much damage done is basically when you do out the math. Deadly Strikes should be a little bit stronger than running Lokkestiiz on the front bar. So both of those guys, big shout out for them. I have links in the description below to their YouTube channels if you guys also want to subscribe to them as well. So this particular video is going to be very similar to Skinny Cheeks' build, mainly because of what we discussed in various discords for people who were interested in Stamina Templar builds. So this particular build video will be a little bit longer than the other DPS build videos because we do have a fairly unique circumstance here with different gear setup as well as different CP setups compared to your typical stamina DPS. So I do have a link for the gear video up in the upper right hand corner right about now. You can still use that gear, you still can use that CP, but I do highly recommend looking at this video in its entirety to get a better sense of what is going to be best for a Stamina Templar. So let's go ahead and get started here first with gear. It's actually a fairly big change for gear here. So first we are going to be running Selene's rather than Maarselok or Velidreth, and that's mainly because we do deal melee damage. Biting jabs does count as melee damage, and we will usually be within range to hit things with Selene's. Now there is a caveat that I do want to mention here, and it's the fact that Selene's is only single target. I mentioned this in the stamina gear video, but I thought I'd reiterate it here. Selene's is strictly for single target DPS. If you are in a situation where you want a little bit more cleave, then Velidreth or Maarselok are going to be the better options. But in terms of just raw single target damage, Selene's is going to be the strongest option here because we're pretty much just spamming jabs for a large majority of our rotation. So we're able to deal a lot of melee damage, so we're able to proc this fairly often, if not on cooldown. Relequen, not a big surprise here. If you want to replace this with a different set like Aegis Caller or New Winged Acolyte for trash fights, go ahead and do that, but for single target damage, Relequen is going to be the set we're going to be using. Then I mentioned this earlier, but Liko did point out that Deadly Strikes should be stronger than Lokkestiiz on the front bar, so we are going to be running Deadly Strike rather than Lokkestiiz on the front bar. That means if you want to run Lokkestiiz, you'll be replacing Relequen rather than your front bar set. You can still run Lokkestiiz as a front bar set, but Deadly Strike is going to be stronger on a Stamina Templar, mainly because it buffs pretty much all of our damage abilities. The only damage ability that does not buff is going to be Ritual Retribution, because that deals magic damage, but it increases biting jabs, increases our rearming trap, barbed trap, so it's very strong here. So we have jewelry and weapons. Now for those of you guys who are concerned that having Deadly Strike as a front bar set means that our Endless Hail in the back bar is not going to be affected, that is not true. Once you swap over to your front bar, you do get the additional 20% damage done automatically applied to your ticks. Remember that Endless Hail does dynamically change depending on your bonuses, so it will update once you are on your front bar when you have Endless Hail going. Then we have the Maelstrom Bow infused with weapon damage enchant, not a big surprise here. Front bar is still Nirn sharpened with a damage health poison here. So this is the new gear that we're going to be running. Let's go over skills next, because that's next in line. We have Biting Jabs, Power of the Light, and then we have two Fighter's Guild abilities here so that you can flex out. It's called Camouflage Hunter. This is for the Minor Berserk that you get from flanking. So in some situations, Camouflage Hunter is going to be very beneficial because you get better Minor Berserk uptime. Barbed Trap for the Minor Force. And Silver Shards I have here as an AoE, but you can also run the other Fighter's Guild ability, which is Circle of Protection. I recommend running Ring of Preservation because it gives you a small heal along with the Minor Protection. So really nice ability here. It's kind of up to you which one of these two abilities you want to slot down here. You're mainly using this here for the additional damage you get from the Slayer passive, which gives us additional weapon damage for each Spider Guild ability we have slotted. Next, we have Flawless Dawnbreaker here. Now, I have gone back and forth a lot about which ultimate you want to use. Skinny Cheeks does use Flawless Dawnbreaker in his Parse, but we will be using Empowering Sweep for this Parse, and I do already have a Parse with Flawless Dawnbreaker, so we can compare those two Parses to kind of see which one is going to be the stronger ultimate to use. Anyways, for our back bar, we still have Silver Shards and Camouflaged Hunter, same reasons, so you can, of course, replace this with Finger Preservation. Then we have Endless Hail, Ritual of Retribution. This does scale off of our weapon damage, so it will deal very good damage. It doesn't scale off of all of our CPs because it deals magic damage rather than physical damage, but it's still a fairly strong dot. Then we have Restoring Focus to help us out with Sustain if we need it. We might not necessarily need it. At the very least, when I was doing the rotation, I didn't need to use it on cooldown. I needed to use it maybe like once or twice during the Parse. But if you are having trouble sustaining, then you can run Restoring Focus down. It also provides Major Resolve, so it just gives you a little bit more survivability, which is never a bad thing. Then we have Empowering Sweep here. So again, we're going to be using this as our ultimate for this particular Parse, and I will compare that to the Flawless Dawnbreaker Parse. The other potential option to run here would be, if you don't need the sustain from Restoring Focus, to run Blazing Spear here, and you wouldn't really be using this ability, you'd just be using this, slotting this for the Piercing Spear passive, and then you'd be running Ballista here. Where is it? You're running Ballista on the back bar here instead of Empowering Sweep. So you maintain the crit damage from having Blazing Spear slotted, you wouldn't be using that, then you'd be running Ballista here instead. So a few different ultimate options here, but we are going to be sticking with Empowering Sweep and Restoring Focus here. Next, for champion points. So one of the big changes here is also champion points. We don't have a lot of dots, so with only 2 dots we have running, or I should say 3 dots we have running, are going to be Ritual Retribution, Endless Hail, and Barbed Trap. Biting Jabs does scale off of Master at Arms, and we are using a lot of Biting Jabs, so we're going to put a lot more points into Master at Arms compared to Thaumaturge here. So we have 13 Thaumaturge, 66 into Master at Arms, 66 Precise Strike, 61 Piercing, 64 Mighty. Now, the next jump point for Thaumaturge, you can actually, too much. You can drop 5 points out of Precise Strikes and bump this up to 18 if you'd like. So you do get an additional 2% this way, and you end up losing 1% critical damage. It's up to you whether you want to do this or not. The DPS difference is going to be pretty small overall, so we'll just stick with 13 and 66. But again, you can do 18 and 61. You know what? Let's stick with 18 and 61. Again, the DPS difference is going to be very, very small because you're looking at very small percentage jumps over relatively small damage contributions overall. But that pretty much covers all the build information. Now, the rotation itself, very straightforward. So if you guys watch Skinny Cheeks' video, it's pretty straightforward. So first, obviously, we're just going to be using Biting Jabs the whole time here. Next, I want to point out Power of the Light. Make sure that it runs completely out. Do not recast Power of the Light early. If you recast this early, you actually lose the copy to damage. So you have to make sure it runs completely out, make sure you hear the explosion, and then recast Power of the Light. You will end up having a little bit of downtime, which is fine, but you do need to make sure that a full 6 seconds goes by before you recast Power of the Light. Beyond that, though, pretty straightforward in terms of your rotation. Make sure to pre-buff with Restoring Focus. Open up with your Barbed Trap. Put down your 2 dots on your back bar. Power of the Light, and then Biting Jabs. I'm just going to spam Biting Jabs until Power of the Light explodes. Recast Power of the Light. And then when your dots run out, go to your back bar. Re-up them. And just keep on spamming your jabs. You can see here, very straightforward rotation. The good thing is you can pretty much pair Endless Hail and Ritual Retribution together. So you can always just use them sort of back to back on your back bar. So your back bar is going to be pretty straightforward. Beyond that, though, is just keeping an eye on your other dots. Use Power of the Light once 6 seconds runs out, and put up Rearming Trap once the buff is about to run out. Just remember that Rearming Trap does have a arm time, so you do want to recast it a little bit early, so that way you're not losing out on any sort of minor force. If it runs out completely, then you have about 1.5 seconds of no minor force uptime, so just make sure to recast our Barbed Trap a little bit early. Now again, I am going to be using Empowering Sweep rather than Flawless Dawnbreaker like Skinny Cheeks does on his Parse. This is just sort of a point of comparison here. In reality, I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference in DPS, but I did do a Parse with Flawless Dawnbreaker earlier, so we will be able to compare which one's actually going to be a little bit better. And again, you can use Ballista as well. Just make sure to replace Restoring Focus with Blazing Spear, and keep in mind that because you're losing Restoring Focus, you won't necessarily have the option of getting that major resolve or the additional stamina regen from using this ability. So keep that in mind if you do want to run Ballista here. So we will be doing a 21 million dummy parse. Now I want to reiterate that 21 million dummy parses should not be used as a proxy or an indication of your in-raid performance. This just gives us sort of a baseline to compare across the different classes, because now all the classes have pretty much identical buffs with the exception of necromancers with their major vulnerability. In an actual raid environment, you will have different buffs and debuffs active. Mainly, you'll have a lot more sustain in an actual raid. We are trying to mimic that by using Lava Foot, but in an actual raid, you will have a little bit better sustain. You're getting things like Ziphonia Blades, the Master's Restoration Staff, and so on. So you will have a little bit better sustain in an actual raid environment. And you are losing a couple of debuffs on the target dummy here. So we don't have, for example, Zens or Martial Knowledge or Major Vulnerability. So the actual in-raid performance is going to differ compared to what you see on a 21 million dummy parse. Again, this is just being used so we have a baseline comparison across the different classes in the game. So let's go ahead and get started with our parse. Remember, we need to let Power of the Light run completely out before we cast it. Now, if you're running Power of the Light for the Minor Fracture, Minor Breach, it's not a big deal if you have a little bit of downtime, because those debuffs now last for 9 seconds. One thing I will note with using Biting Jabs is that because there's a channel associated with it, it's a little bit tricky using it in combination with something like potions and synergies. You can't activate them while you're in the channel animation. Just make sure to time your potion use so you don't use it in the middle of the channel, because otherwise you won't be able to use your potion. Same thing with synergies. You can queue your synergy, so if you hit your synergy key, you'll use the synergy right when you get out of the channel animation, but it is going to be a little bit funky potentially. I actually think we're doing better DPS, at least I'm doing better DPS right now using Empowering Sweeps compared to Flawless Dawnbreaker. My rationale for using Empowering Sweeps is you can get it up faster. Yeah, there's a sexual innuendo there. But yeah, it costs less ultimate, so you can get it up faster, plus it also gives you Empower during the duration, which does help out your DPS. But you should be light weaving all the time. And while light attacks are not going to be quite as strong on a stamina DPS compared to a magic DPS, it's still important to get that buff there. At least I think it's pretty good to get that buff. Now, I could, in theory, go to the back bar and use the ultimate once I get it. I am waiting until I'm on my back bar to recast my dots to use it. But it's kind of up to you how you want to do it or not. If you're able to keep an eye on your ultimate, it does cost only 72 ultimate, so fairly straightforward. Once you see your ultimate hit 72, just go to your back bar and use it. So the trick with Power of the Light, if you guys kind of want a little bit of a hint, and I alluded to it earlier, is once you hear that explosion, you know you're able to reuse Power of the Light again. You're able to reapply it. If you don't hear the explosion, don't cast Power of the Light. Execute, no change. Now, one of the advantages of running Deadly Strike versus Lokkestiiz is it doesn't really matter which bar you use your ultimate on, use your synergy on, because you're not running Lokkestiiz. Or if you are, it's on the body, so in that case, it doesn't really matter where you use your synergy. Yeah, I think we're actually doing more DPS with Empowering Sweep than Flawless Dawnbreaker. Unless my Parse is just bad with Flawless Dawnbreaker. But there we go, there you have it. That is the Stamina Templar DPS. Take a look at our Parse. Just over 52, or 52, 85.2k. Biting Jabs here, doing a crap ton of damage here. Then we have Relequen. Burning Light's pretty nice because we're using a lot of Biting Jabs here. And you can see here Empowering Sweep is actually not terrible. And we are getting pretty good sort of emphasis on our light attacks because we are getting the empowered through Empowering Sweep. And you can probably get better DPS with Empowering Sweep, like I mentioned during the Parse. Once you see you hit about 72 ultimate, just swap to your back bar, use your ultimate, swap back to your front bar, and keep on jabbing. It's kind of up to you how you want to deal with that. Now, for a point of comparison, this was the Flawless Dawnbreaker Parse here that I did earlier, 83.8k, and the Flawless Dawnbreaker ended up doing, let's see, 2600 DPS. We compare that to Empowering Sweep, which did 2200, but that's also not including the additional Empower DPS that we're getting here. So let's see, 10.5 compared to 9.8, so all in all, the Empowering Sweep actually ends up being just a little bit stronger, at the very least for my Parse. For Skinny Cheeks, perhaps he already tried this and he ended up finding that Flawless Dawnbreaker was better for him. But for me, at the very least, seems like Empowering Sweep is going to be the ultimate that I would use if I were to run a Stamina Templar. So very easy rotation, one of the easiest classes to get into here, and all your sets are fairly easy to obtain. Relequen, you can just run normal for the non-perfect version, and Deadly Strikes, because it's a Cyrodiil set, you can buy it off guild traders. So again, fairly easy to obtain, especially since Deadly Strike has been out for a very long time. But that concludes this build video. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Again, I do have links in the description below to both Skinny Cheeks, his YouTube channel, and Lico's YouTube channel. Again, big thanks to both of those guys for helping me out with Stamina Templars, whether or not you guys realized it or not. Again, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.